Hello friends, Tia, your San Francisco Bay Area luxury real estate specialist. Today's video is going to be the buyer experience part 3, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about the escrow process, as well as any other aspect of purchasing a property that I can get through. It seems like there's an awful lot to talk about, so I'm having a hard time getting all the way through, but we'll do it. So please remember to like and subscribe. That way, every time I post, these come up. I decided I'm going to post a little bit more frequently because there's absolutely so much to cover. And as I've mentioned before, we're going to have some guests come in and talk about lending and talk about escrow, talk about investing. So I'm really excited and looking forward to having all those guests. I'm also looking forward to some location shooting that I'm going to be doing here at some local hotspots here in Oakland. And we'll talk a little bit about moving to Oakland as well, and why it's such a thriving and fabulous city to live in. So again, please like and subscribe, tell your friends, and I look forward to talking with you about real estate. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the shopping process, about making an offer, and hopefully we'll be able to get through all of that as well as a bit more. So firstly, when we last left off, we talked about the process and how I think it's very important to focus on shopping because it's one of the best parts of purchasing a home. And so when we undertake shopping, just realize that you can trust the process. The home that will work for you will speak to you. You'll find a lot of nice properties, a lot of properties that could work for you. And a great rule of thumb is the 8 out of 10 rule, which is if a home has, well, certainly 7, but absolutely 8 out of the 10 things that you want. So you say walking distance to fun activities, you'd say good school, you'd say 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. You know, as you go down your list of things that you'd really like to have, and that's a good idea as well, to create a list of 10 things that you'd like to have, maybe not necessarily have to, but certainly like to have. And as you come across homes that are 7 and certainly 8 out of 10 on those lists, that's the home you need to make an offer on. Because it's never going to be a 10 out of 10. And once you move into the home and you start living there, you'll start realizing that some of the things that you thought were important to have aren't important to have at all. And, you know, from my own personal experience, I lived in a condo in the middle of everything just off Telegraph Avenue in the Temescal district. We were half a block from a tattoo parlor and a bar and the Temescal Alley, which used to be stables and has now been converted to businesses. So there's a great coffee shop, there's a barber. It's a place that people really, really want to be. And so, you know, when I was 30, that was awesome. I loved being in the middle of everything, and loved having a bar, you know, many bars within walking distance. And then once my kids became teenagers, I realized I didn't want any of that. So I actually ended up moving to Montclair, the Montclair district, and we'll talk also about all these different districts and all the great things they have to offer. And it ended up having a better school district. It's not necessarily walking distance to everything, but was great for me because I, you know, had a car, which I love being in. And you know, it was 10 minutes by car from a darling little village that has all of those things: restaurants, bars, post office, Safeway, Lucky, all the amenities that you want. So, you know, once you just realize that once you move into a property as well, your needs may change or your desires may change, and you may realize, okay, I thought I wanted that, but now I realize that I didn't really. So that's why we talk about the 8 out of 10 rule, because probably a couple of things on those lists are going to change, on that list that you have, are going to change over time, or you're going to realize you can live without. So bear that in mind and just enjoy the process. So it being the San Francisco Bay Area, Oakland, San Francisco, Berkeley, El Cerrito, these are all the areas that I cover. There's some great properties. And my job isn't to sell you a property. My job is to sell you to the other side, to sell your picture, your scenario. So that's why I always suggest a seller letter and you're going to want to do a little research with that letter, or as much as time will allow, and share what's comfortable to you. Some people aren't comfortable with a lot of personal information, which I understand completely. So for those clients, I tell them to really focus on the property, the neighborhood, the specifics, the upgrades that the seller has done to the property, if they were able to do upgrades to the property, and if they weren't able to do upgrades, to let them know that you're planning on taking care of the property and maybe not necessarily changing everything, even though that may be what you want to do, and that you're right, because it's going to be your property. But certainly that you're going to take care of it, that you're going to maintain it, that if there's any repairs that need to be done, that you're going to take care of those. And it's not a contract, but it's just a way of letting the person know that you respect their home and are going to take good care of it. So the seller letter, that's something that I absolutely recommend, and just craft it as best as you can, and share as much as you would like to share, and go from there. So after we have, so that's all part of preparing you to be able to make an offer. And here is something that's key, just so that you're not scrambling at the last moment to pull your offer together. What you're going to need is your pre-approval, which we already have, right? Your seller letter. You're going to need contract documents, which the agent is going to prepare for you. And oftentimes in the Bay Area, you're going to need proof of funds. So you're going to need a pre-approval, not a pre-qualification, but a pre-approval. And I know that some lenders, for some reason, put on the top of the document that it's a pre-qualification, but then if you actually read the document, it says that your assets, meaning money that you have in the bank, or that your parents have in the bank, or whomever is giving your down payment, have been verified, your employment has been verified, your credit report has been pulled, and your debt-to-income ratio, they've been able to verify that because that's actually on your credit report. So that's how they are able to establish that. So that means you're pre-approved. But unfortunately, they put a big pre-qual at the top of the piece of paper. So just ask, just make sure that it's a pre-approval and not a pre-qualification, because purchasing a property in the Bay Area is so competitive. You're going to need a full pre-approval and a proof of funds. And proof of funds, now this is an interesting one, because proof of funds doesn't actually have to necessarily be the account that you're pulling the funds from. But what you're trying to establish is that the seller's not going to get all the way to the end of the process, and then you don't have your down payment, or you don't have your closing costs. And we'll talk about closing costs a little bit more in a minute, but because those can be negotiated between the buyer and the seller. Anyway, when you're making your offer, those are the 4 documents that you're going to need, or PDFs that you're going to need. So maybe start working on those, and then the closing cost discussion becomes important when you're pulling together your offer documents, because not only are you going to put on your offer documents what purchase price you're willing to pay, but you're also going to put who is going to be expected to pay those closing costs. Now, in a competitive situation, unless you're going to be willing to increase your offer by the amount of the closing costs, it is going to be a detriment to your offer. So what do I mean by closing costs? Closing costs are like, okay, let's say, for example, you were able to actually walk into a place and purchase an item. Well, if it says on the tag that the item is $75, you don't pay $75, right? You pay something closer to $85, because there's tax. City, state, whatever your municipality charges for taxes. Well, it's the same thing when you purchase a house. You have taxes. You have title and escrow fees, you have document preparation fees, you have notary fees, you have fees, okay? And you have lender fees for getting a loan. So all of those fees can be about 3% of the purchase price. So that's important to bear in mind, because your down payment, as we know, could be as little as 5%, but your closing costs could be 3%. Meaning that at the end of the day, you need to pay 8% to get into the house. And so that's important to know because people don't, that's another thing that lenders forget to discuss is closing costs. And that's some of that upfront money that you're going to need going in the door to be able to purchase the property. So let's talk a little bit about the money that you're going to need to be able to, once you make an offer, to get through escrow. So right up front, you're going to need your deposit, which is also 3% here in the Bay Area. And as you start to get into some of the outlying later areas, like Antioch and areas like that, and Richmond, sometimes you can go down to the 1%, or it's not uncommon to see 1%, but certainly Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco, El Cerrito, Albany, they're going to want to see that 3%. And that 3% is just going to sit in escrow, protected. It's called a good faith earnest money deposit, and it's just going to sit there while you get your appraisal, while you get your reports, while those final negotiations occur regarding the property. Now, this is a description of a textbook situation. What happens often in these very competitive areas is that people start waiving contingencies. And contingencies are the little fail-safes in the contract that allow you to be able to back out as a buyer if you determine there's an issue. And by issue, I don't mean necessarily condition, although sometimes that can be a reason, but you can usually tell walking in the front door if it's if the condition is going to be an issue, and those tend to be the properties that sell for cash. But if the property doesn't appraise, for example, or if you can't get your loan. And these are the things that these are the three issues of why you want an agent. Because usually if you've made an offer on a property, you have a pretty good sense of condition because maybe reports were provided up front, or your husband's a contractor, or you're a contractor, or whatnot. So you kind of knew that going in the door, and you don't want a deal falling apart because of any of these issues. And a good agent's going to tell you when you walk in, these might be the issues. This is what's going on in the market right now. So we might be deficient on appraisal, and you shouldn't be having a deal falling out because you can't get your loan because you're pre-approved, and either the agent has a relationship with the lender, or there's been some good conversations with the lender to know that that's not going to be an issue. But even that said, I try to hold on to the contingencies as much as I can to give the buyer an opportunity to investigate the property and negotiate, and a lot of the traditional things that we used to be able to do before everyone got in the habit of waiving contingencies. But that's basically what happens then is the situation starts getting competitive. People can't go any higher because, number one, they can't afford more, or number two, the property won't appraise because the nearby comparable properties are not that high yet. The comparable properties that have closed escrow are not at that high amount yet, so it would be perilous to remove the appraisal contingency. So then, or it would be perilous to raise the price. So then people start waiving contingencies, and that came to mind because we were talking about the deposit. So in a textbook situation, the deposit sits there until we kind of make it through these signposts, inspection, appraisal, and loan. And only after we've been able to confirm that all of these have been taken care of, then the deposit becomes in jeopardy because you've removed contingencies, right? But in a situation that's competitive, people remove those contingencies up front, and that's where it can get a little bit dicey. So I usually try to hold on to at least a 3-day inspection contingency, especially in the situation where reports have been provided up front. If they have been provided up front, then we can feel a little bit more confident about shortening or waiving that contingency. Then I pull comps, which are basically little reports of similar properties in the area that let you know what they sold for. And comps are also great because it gives us an idea of what this property is probably going to sell for. And then, with the loan process, usually I have a great relationship with the lenders. I know how thoroughly you've been pre-approved, and so I know what we're looking at in terms of the probability of your loan going through. So looks like we're already to the end of our time, but we made great progress today. So we made an offer. We talked about our deposit. We talked about closing costs. In the upcoming video, buyer experience part 4, I'd like to get through. You've got an accepted offer. Now what happens? So anyway, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Let me know what your process was like. And again, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Alrighty, have a great day. Bye.